countries through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime.
All right, Steve, so what's the reality there?
So the reality there, and we've talked about this before, and for some reason Donald Trump can't process the actual numbers. He prefers to deal in his alternate reality. But the reality is, in fact, that violent crime has dropped 26% under the Biden-Harris administration. It has gone from 398 per 100,000 people to 294 per 100,000 people. This is an annualized figure, so it's a very significant drop this year in particular. And under the Trump administration, violent crime was effectively flat, went up a little bit. That was COVID, in fairness, but basically no progress, huge progress under Biden in violent crime. Now, one of the things that the former president, the other guy, would like us all to think is that all this violent crime, however much there is being committed by immigrants. And we've talked about this before also, and it doesn't seem to have penetrated either. But the fact is that when you look at who commits violent crimes, it is disproportionately native-born Americans, not immigrants. So this is the rate of crime produced by native-born Americans. This is by legal immigrants, and this is by undocumented immigrants. And if you look at property crime, if you look at drug violations, you're going to find the same thing. And it's not that crazy to think about. If you come here and you're an undocumented immigrant, you don't want to be sent back. So you are much more likely to be a law-abiding citizen. And documented immigrants are very happy to be here. They don't want to commit crimes. And so the high crime rates are really among native-born Americans, and they've been going down. And this is utterly contrary to what Donald Trump said.
So I want to just stop here for a second, and we just need to underline these two facts because, first of all, regarding the, quote, migrant crime, the reality is, I mean, this has been the case for years. And for years, when Donald Trump and other demagogues have been talking about illegal immigrants coming into America and then committing a vast array of crimes, it's just not true. The data never shows it. And by the way, I've always said my entire life, adult life, that the first thing somebody should do when they come to America shouldn't be breaking a crime. So yes, they cross the border illegally. That's a crime. They shouldn't do that. And I wish Trump would not have killed our border security bill that you know, we Republicans wanted to pass and Democrats wanted to pass. But this, this bears repeating what you said, because this isn't a new fact. This is an ongoing fact. The second thing, Steve, is the big lie another big lie that crime is just rampant. You look at your numbers, and per 100,000, let's underline this, the crime rate thus far per 100,000 residents, lower violent crime rate than any year that Donald Trump was president, and in fact, lower per 100,000 people crime rate. Some are saying if the numbers hold out, it will be the lowest number since 1950. And so underline just the difference between perception and reality on this front.
Yeah, I don't have 1950 here, but you can see even from the beginning of Obama what's happened to the crime rate from here to here, and a material amount of it, again, just to repeat, has come under the Biden administration.
Yeah, and another obvious lie, and an obvious lie that people like Neil Cavuto and commentators on CNBC, a lot of business people that even support Donald Trump will tell you is a lie, is the claim that tariffs won't raise prices. Let's take a look at that lie.
Joe,
they're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years.
What are the facts? All right. What are the facts? What are the facts? Steve.
Joe, it's amusing to me, as you know, an economics guy, that trade and tariffs have not been this much of an issue, I think, since the days of Grover Cleveland and Benjamin Harrison when they fought about tariffs. But every American now has heard a lot about tariffs. So let's talk about the reality of tariffs. Trump says China's going to pay the tariffs, or whatever country the goods are coming from. That is utterly false. First of all, tariffs are paid by the companies that bring the goods into the country, not by some other foreign country. What do those companies do when they're paying tariffs? They raise their prices. So here's a real-life example of what can happen. These are laundry machine prices. Trump imposed tariffs on them back in 2018. Prices immediately, or over a period of time, went up $200. That was faster than the increase in the rate of inflation. Biden allowed those tariffs to expire. Prices went down $75. And all in all, the price of laundry machines has now increased by less than the overall inflation rate. So you can see a live example. If you put tariffs on, prices go up. You take them off, prices go down. They're a national sales tax, just as Kamala Harris said. They're paid by the consumer. So let's see what the consumer is paying. There are various estimates around of what the Trump tariffs would cost. He's talking about 20% on everything, 60% on what comes in from China. There are estimates that it would cost somewhere between $2,600 and $4,000 a year per family, but that is not equally distributed. Taxes are regressive. People at the lower end pay a higher share of their income, just like they do in sales tax, in tariffs. And you can see the impact here. If you're at the bottom, the Trump tariffs would cost you 6.3% of your income, of your after-tax income. If you're at the top, it would only cost you 2.9% of your after-tax income. So we are, in effect, and it's not huge numbers, we are making the wealthier wealthier and the poor poorer when we put taxes on, as well as burdening the whole society with anywhere up to $4,000 of additional cost per family.
So, Steve, we held up the front page of the Wall Street Journal earlier. Inflation slows to 3-year low. When you talk about tariffs, how does the Wall Street Journal editorial board, how does some of the guys on Wall Street that you know so well and talk to who support Donald Trump, how do they go along with a tariff program, which you lay out very clearly and every economist will do for you as well, that plainly is a tax on everyday Americans?
I think the Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street Journal editorial board knows that they're alike. Why do they support Trump in face of the tariffs? Their argument is basically that you get some bad stuff with Trump, and they've acknowledged it. You saw their editorial after the debate. But you also get a pro-business, pro-deregulation, you get all this stuff. And so when you line it up against the Democrat, they still think that from a business point of view, you're better off, but they hate this. And they think this is bad for our economy and for basically not just companies, but for consumers.
And it appears to be the foundation of his plan. Remember, he said last week he's going to pay for child care with tariffs. All right, let's move on. Donald Trump making false claims about oil production in America as well as spending on Ukraine. Let's listen.
I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. They took over. They got rid of it. We're in for $250 billion or more, because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe.
Steve, what's the truth on these two?
You know, he got his numbers almost exactly reversed. It's quite remarkable. At least he had some numbers in his head. They just were the wrong ones for the wrong thing. So the fact is that Europe has been far more generous to Ukraine, as we have been, over $180 billion to Ukraine. We are limping, I shouldn't say limping along, because it's a reasonable amount of money. We are sending $100 billion. And, you know, this whole little flatline piece here, you remember the whole fight last spring about whether to give them money at all, and it barely got done at all. And so we are by far the laggards in who's contributing more to the Ukraine problem.
All right, Morning Joe economic analyst, as always, breaking it down with facts. We appreciate it, Steve. Great to have you with us. We'll see you again soon. Anand, let's talk a little bit about the debate. In your latest piece, you write, quote, the most important new thing I saw Kamala Harris do was pre-bunking, not debunking, is waiting for someone to lie and then hitting back with the truth. It doesn't work in politics as much as you would hope it would in an age saturated by lies, but pre-bunking works better. Pre-bunking is explaining to people how they are being, or better yet, will be manipulated, what the motive is, how the con works, how the lie will be crafted, and how it will function, and for extra credit, who benefits from it and how. In the age of Trump, too many of his opponents have been all debunk and no pre-bunk. writes Anand Giridharadas. And she said it right at the outset. She said, let me say, you're going to hear a whole bunch of lies tonight. And then as he rolled them out, she explained why they were lies.
Yeah, you know, we've talked about this before, one of the most interesting stories about the ascension of Kamala Harris to the top of this ticket is that she has brought with her a lot of the new thinking that has been circulating in these conversations in the Democratic Party about how to run campaigns, and I think she's elevated. And one of these things is pre-bunking. It simply does not work to fact-check Donald Trump. I mean, journalists should do it, but his lies, it just doesn't, reach people when you say, no, actually, this was the crowd size, or no, actually, this happened on January 6th. But if you explain, as the clip showed, what this pre-bunking kind of tells you to do is to explain why this is happening, how it's happening. And she did it several times. She did it about foreign autocrats. If you're hearing foreign autocrats say nice things about this guy, here's why. It's not because he's a tough, strong guy like he might tell you. It's because he's amenable to flattery and favors. That's, again, pre-bunking.
And then he went on to praise an autocrat, specifically in Viktor Orban.
And the reason this kind of research on why this works against lies and disinformation is that it works a little bit like vaccines, just to inflame the right even more, that actually by kind of exposing people in advance to a little bit of what's about to come, you prepare them better. Then when they hear it, they're more kind of careful about kind of immediately believing it. And I thought that was a very, very interesting thing she did multiple times throughout that night.
And Mike Barnicle, and it brings up such a good point. And it was a brilliant tactic, and it's a lawyer. She's been a lawyer, obviously, and a prosecutor, attorney general. It's what lawyers often do to juries at the beginning. You reported on a lot of trials in Boston, and what does the defense counsel always do? They'll get up and say, "Now you're going to hear from the state A, B, C, D, and they're going to tell you 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me tell you why they're wrong." And he's so right. Kamala Harris the other night planted that in people's minds, saying, watch out, look this is what you're going to get. And sure enough, Donald Trump didn't disappoint. And that is the antithesis of those 16 poor Republicans standing on the stage in 2016 and everybody else that had to respond to one lie after another lie after another lie after the horse had already left the barn, as they would say.
In addition to everything that you just said in your apt description of who she is, former prosecutor, and her behavior and her command of the situation the other evening, she was also, for all practical purposes, an incumbent standing on the stage against Donald Trump. He was a challenger. And brushing off the challenger with facts, even before the debate begins, I think changed and altered everything that evening, from the handshake that she walked across the stage to give to him, which probably threw him off a little, we don't know for sure, but probably threw him off his game a bit. Then going right after him with such command of the stage, her command presence, and the way she went after him, that was really the evening. At the end, boom, it was over before it began.
Mark McKinnon, yesterday, you and Bob Shrum had a back and forth where you both agreed that Kamala Harris's debate performance as a Republican and a Democrat who had prepared presidents for several debates, or presidential candidates for several debates, you said it was one of the best you've ever seen. And Shrum said, going back to JFK in 1960, it's the best that he's seen.
JFK in 1960 and Ronald Reagan in 1980. Neil Cavuto from Fox said the obvious out loud at the time.